In the pursuit of truth, clarity is essential. We have stripped away the narrative to show you unfiltered, unedited reality. Witness raw, compelling footage from the front lines of justice, allowing the actual events to speak entirely for themselves.
Don't move, not one more step.
I'm standing still.
You expect me to believe this is your house? In this neighborhood? With these homes? You think I'm just gonna nod and walk away?
I bought it. My name's on the
I've been patrolling this street for years. I know the families here, I know the cars, I know the
At 2:47 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon in a quiet cul-de-sac in the Maplewood Estates subdivision, two police officers pinned a black man face down on his own front lawn. He was wearing gym shorts and a faded navy t-shirt. His wrists were cuffed behind his back, pressed into the grass hard enough to draw blood. His name was on the mailbox 10 feet away. His military ID was on the kitchen counter just inside the front door, and his 7-year-old daughter stood in that doorway, screaming for her father, while an officer blocked her path with an outstretched arm. The man on the ground was Senior Chief Darnell Carter, an active-duty Navy SEAL with 17 years of decorated Special Operations service. He had survived combat deployments most people would never read about. He had carried wounded teammates through enemy fire. He had earned commendations that filled an entire drawer in his home office. And now he was face down on the lawn he mowed every Sunday morning, bleeding from the wrists, while his daughter begged strangers to stop hurting him. The neighbor who made the call stood on her porch 15 yards away, arms crossed, lips pressed together in a thin, satisfied line. She watched the scene like someone watching a plan come together. She had no idea what she had just set in motion. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe because the next story is one you don't want to miss. Senior Chief Darnell Carter was 39 years old. He had spent more than half his life in uniform, 17 years in naval special warfare, rotating between combat deployments, advanced training cycles, and the rare stretches of quiet at home that never lasted long enough. He had been awarded the Bronze Star, 2 Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medals, and a Purple Heart he never talked about. His record was spotless. His reputation within his unit was simple. Darnell gets it done and keeps his people alive. 6 months earlier, he had purchased a 4-bedroom home in Maplewood Estates, a clean, tree-lined subdivision on the west side of the city. It was the kind of neighborhood with trimmed hedges, American flags on porches, and block parties in the summer. He had chosen it for one reason: his daughter, Zoe. She was 7, bright, fearless, and the only person in the world who could make him laugh until his chest hurt. Her mother, Darnell's wife, had passed from cancer 2 years prior. Since then, it had been just the two of them. Every morning followed the same rhythm. Darnell woke at 500, ran 3 miles through the neighborhood while the streets were still dark, then came home to make breakfast. Eggs, toast, fruit. Zoe always wanted pancakes. He gave in on Saturdays. By the time she was up, the kitchen smelled like syrup and coffee, and for a few hours, the world felt like something other than a mission. But the neighborhood had not welcomed them. Not openly. Not with slurs or signs. It was quieter than that. It was the way conversations stopped when he walked past, the way no one introduced themselves in the first month, the way HOA notices appeared on his door about the height of his grass 2 days after he moved in, while lawns on either side of him went untouched. And then there was the woman next door. Karen Whitfield was 58 years old and had lived on Maplewood Drive for 22 years. She was retired from an office management position at a local insurance firm and had appointed herself the unofficial coordinator of the Neighborhood Watch, a role no one had asked her to fill and no one had the energy to challenge. She knew every car that belonged on the street, every dog walker's schedule, every trash can that stayed out too long. She kept a spiral notebook on her kitchen counter where she logged anything she considered out of place. A van parked too long, an unfamiliar face on the sidewalk, a garage door left open past dark. Her husband Gerald, 61, was a quiet man who read the paper in his recliner and agreed with whatever Karen said, not because he believed it, but because disagreeing cost more energy than it was worth. He never questioned her calls, never asked her to stop, never once walked across the yard to introduce himself to the new neighbor. Karen had opposed the sale of the house from the beginning. Before Darnell had even moved in, she had written 3 emails to the HOA board expressing concerns about maintaining neighborhood character and preserving community standards. She never used the word race. She didn't have to. In the 6 months since Darnell moved in, Karen had called the police 8 times in connection with his property. Once for a plumber's van she didn't recognize, once for a friend of Darnell's who sat in a parked car for 10 minutes waiting to be let in, once for an Amazon delivery driver who walked to the side gate. Every call was logged by dispatch. Every call resulted in no violation, no arrest, no crime. But Karen kept calling, and she kept writing in her notebook. Times he left, times he returned, how many lights were on at night, whether the garage was open or closed. She watched his house the way a person watches something they believe doesn't belong. That Saturday afternoon, Darnell was in his open garage assembling a basketball hoop he had ordered for Zoe's birthday. The box was spread across the driveway, parts and bolts laid out on a towel, instructions pinned under a wrench. He had a small speaker playing music on the workbench and a glass of water beside it. Zoe was inside watching cartoons, checking through the window every few minutes to see how the hoop was coming along. It was the kind of scene that played out in driveways across the country every weekend. A father building something for his kid. Nothing more. But from her kitchen window, Karen Whitfield saw something different. She saw a black man in her neighbor's garage with tools and open boxes. She watched for less than 2 minutes before picking up her phone and dialing 911. The call was recorded. Her voice was calm, steady, almost rehearsed. She told the dispatcher there was a suspicious black male who appeared to be breaking into a garage at the address. She paused, then added that he could be armed and that she believed there was a child inside the house who might be in danger. Every word was chosen. The mention of a weapon guaranteed an elevated response. The mention of a child in danger ensured officers would arrive fast and arrive aggressive. She never once mentioned the possibility that the man might live there. She never said he was her neighbor. She never described the basketball hoop parts spread across the driveway or the music playing from a small speaker. She described a threat. A black man, possibly armed, near a child. And then she hung up and walked to her porch to wait. Within 4 minutes, dispatch sent 2 patrol units to the address. The call was flagged as a priority, and 2 officers were already reaching for their car doors before Karen had even sat down in her porch chair. The call went out at 2:43 p.m. 2 patrol units were dispatched to Maplewood Drive on a priority response. The dispatcher's notes read, "Suspicious male, possibly armed, child possibly in danger." That language changed everything. It moved the call from a routine check to a high-alert approach. Officers were told to expect a threat before they had even turned onto the street. The lead responder was Officer Ryan Briggs, 36 years old, 10 years with the department. Briggs had built a reputation that depended on who you asked. His supervisors described him as assertive and decisive. Officers who had worked calls with him used different words: aggressive, reactive, heavy-handed. Black residents in the surrounding neighborhoods knew him by pattern, if not by name. He was the officer who always seemed to show up when the call involved someone who looked like them, and who always seemed to find a reason to escalate. 4 formal complaints of excessive force had been filed against Briggs over the past 6 years. 2 involved black men detained during routine stops. 1 involved a teenager handcuffed on a sidewalk for matching a vague description. All 4 had been reviewed internally. All 4 had been dismissed. Briggs had never faced suspension, retraining, or formal discipline of any kind. His partner that afternoon was Officer Dana Sutton, 28, 2 years on the job. She was quiet, competent on paper, and entirely deferential to Briggs. She had never once questioned a decision he made on a call. She followed where he led, did what he did, and wrote her reports to match his. A 3rd unit arrived separately. Corporal James Fenton, 44, was a veteran officer with 18 years of service and a clean record. He had no complaints on file and was known among peers as measured and thorough. He parked at the end of the cul-de-sac and stayed near his vehicle, observing. He did not rush in. That decision, and everything that followed it, would matter later. Briggs and Sutton came in fast. Both patrol cars turned onto Maplewood Drive with lights flashing and sirens cutting through the quiet of the street. Tires barked against the curb as Briggs stopped his cruiser at an angle across the bottom of Darnell's driveway. Sutton pulled in behind him and swung wide to the left. Darnell heard them before he saw them. He set the drill down on the driveway, stepped clear of the basketball hoop parts, and turned toward the street with both hands open and visible at his sides. His posture was straight. His expression was calm. 17 years of training told him exactly what to do and exactly what not to do. Briggs was out of his vehicle before the engine fully stopped. His service weapon was drawn, both hands on the grip, barrel leveled at Darnell's chest from 20 feet away. "Get on the ground now! Hands where I can see them!" Darnell's voice was steady. "I live here. This is my house. My daughter is inside." Briggs moved closer, weapon still raised. "I said get on the ground!" Sutton came around the far side of the cruiser, hand on her holster, cutting off any path toward the side yard. Darnell did not move suddenly. He did not raise his voice. He lowered himself slowly, narrating every motion the way he had been trained. "I'm getting down. I'm kneeling. My hands are open. I am not armed." His knees touched the driveway, then his palms, then the grass at the edge of the lawn. And as Briggs closed the distance with his weapon still drawn, the front door opened. Zoe stood in the doorway in a pink t-shirt and shorts, her eyes wide, her small body frozen for 1 second before the scream came. "Daddy!" Sutton turned and moved toward the door, arm extended. "Get back inside, now!" Zoe didn't move. She screamed again, louder, reaching for her father. Across the street, a man named Victor Langley stepped off his porch, phone already raised and recording. He didn't say a word. He just held the camera steady and let it capture what was happening on Darnell Carter's front lawn. Briggs closed the distance in 3 steps. He grabbed the back of Darnell's neck and drove him forward, forcing his face into the grass. Darnell didn't resist. His arms stayed wide, palms open, fingers spread. Briggs dropped his knee into the center of Darnell's back and pressed down with his full weight. The air left Darnell's lungs in a sharp exhale. "I am not resisting," Darnell said through clenched teeth. "I live here. Please check my ID." Briggs pulled Darnell's wrists together behind his back and snapped the cuffs on hard, metal biting into skin. He yanked them tight, 1 extra click past what was necessary. Then he leaned down, his mouth close to Darnell's ear. "Stop talking." At the front door, Sutton stood with 1 arm across the frame, blocking Zoe from stepping outside. The child was shaking, tears running down her face, her small hands gripping the door frame. "Daddy! Let go of my daddy!" Sutton didn't bend down, didn't soften her voice. "Get inside, now. Close the door." Zoe didn't close the door. She stood there screaming, 7 years old, watching her father pinned to the ground by a man with a badge and a knee on his spine. Karen Whitfield walked slowly to the edge of her yard. She stood just past her property line, arms folded, watching the scene with an expression that held no alarm and no concern. She said nothing. Briggs searched Darnell's pockets roughly. Gym shorts, no wallet, no weapon, no contraband, nothing. Darnell's voice stayed controlled. "My military ID is on the kitchen counter. My name is on the mailbox. You can check both right now." Briggs didn't look at the mailbox, didn't glance at the front door. He leaned back on his knee and said, "People like you always have a story." From across the street, an older black couple stepped onto their porch. James and Beverly Washington, both in their late 60s, longtime residents of the street. Mr. Washington called out, "That man lives there. He's our neighbor. You're making a mistake." Briggs pointed at him without turning his head. "Sir, step back inside or I will arrest you for obstruction." Mrs. Washington grabbed her husband's arm. Her eyes were wet. They stayed on the porch. They did not go inside. Corporal James Fenton had been standing near his cruiser at the end of the cul-de-sac for nearly 4 minutes. He had watched the approach, the drawn weapon, the takedown, the cuffs. He had heard Darnell identify himself twice. He had heard the child screaming from the doorway, and he had watched Briggs ignore every word the man on the ground said. Fenton walked forward now, past Sutton's cruiser, past the basketball hoop part still spread across the driveway. He stopped at the mailbox at the edge of Darnell's front yard and looked at it. The name was printed clearly on the side in white adhesive letters. Carter. He looked at the man in the grass, then back at the mailbox. Then he walked to the front door where Sutton still stood blocking the child. He didn't go inside. He didn't need to. Through the glass panel beside the door, he could see the hallway. Family photos lined the wall. A man in navy dress blues holding a small girl. The same man on the lawn. The same girl in the doorway. Fenton turned and walked back to Briggs. Uncuff him. Briggs looked up. What? His name is on the mailbox. His photos are on the wall. He lives here. Uncuff him. Briggs shook his head. We need to clear the house first. Could be a domestic situation. Could be anything. Fenton's voice dropped. It was no longer a suggestion. I'm a corporal. You're an officer. I'm telling you to take the cuffs off that man right now. Briggs stared at him for a long second, jaw clenched, then stood up and stepped back without reaching for the cuffs. Fenton knelt down beside Darnell. I'm going to remove these. Stay still. He unlocked the left cuff first, then the right. The metal had cut into the skin on both wrists. Blood smeared across Darnell's palms as he brought his hands forward. The moment the cuffs came off, Zoe broke past Sutton and ran across the lawn. She hit her father's chest before he could even sit up fully, her arms locking around his neck, her face buried against him, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Darnell held her with both hands and said nothing. He just held her. Fenton stood and spoke quietly. I'm sorry, sir. Behind them, Briggs turned toward his cruiser. His voice was low, but not low enough. This isn't over. Victor Langley's phone caught it from across the street, and the red light on Fenton's body camera had been blinking the entire time. Darnell sat on the front porch steps with Zoe in his lap. She had stopped screaming, but hadn't stopped shaking. Her fingers gripped his t-shirt so tight her knuckles were pale. He rested one hand on the back of her head and kept his breathing steady, the way he did when he needed the people around him to feel that the worst part was over. His wrists were still bleeding. He didn't wipe them. Corporal Fenton stepped inside the house with Darnell's permission and returned a minute later holding a military ID and a folded set of orders from the kitchen counter. He looked at the ID first. The photo matched. The name read Carter, Darnell A. The rank read Senior Chief Petty Officer. The branch read United States Navy. Below the ID in a leather folio were commendation letters, deployment records, and a summary of service that included Naval Special Warfare Group assignments spanning nearly 2 decades. Fenton's expression shifted as he read. He looked up at Darnell, sitting on the steps holding his daughter, wrists raw, grass stains on his shirt, and something tightened behind his eyes. He keyed his radio. Dispatch, this is Corporal Fenton on scene at Maplewood Drive. The call is unfounded. Subject is the confirmed homeowner and an active duty senior chief in the United States Navy. No violation, no crime. Repeat, no crime. There was a pause on the other end, then a quiet, copy. By the cruiser, Briggs leaned against the hood with his arms crossed. Sutton stood beside him, staring at the ground. Neither of them walked back toward the porch. Neither of them said a word. Karen Whitfield's front door closed softly. She had already gone inside. Victor Langley crossed the street and approached Darnell with his phone in hand. Sir, I recorded the whole thing, every second. You need this. Darnell looked at him. Thank you. Mr. Washington walked over slowly, Beverly beside him. His voice was low but firm. She's done this before. To us. To the family who looked at this house before you bought it. They were a young Latino couple. She called the police on them during the open house. They didn't make an offer. Darnell looked at the Whitfield house. The blinds were closed. Beverly Washington added quietly, Every black or brown person who steps foot on this street, she calls. Every single one. It's been years. Darnell said nothing. He just held Zoe tighter and looked at the blood drying on his wrists. Darnell carried Zoe inside and locked the front door. He sat her on the couch, turned on her favorite show, and told her he would be right back. She didn't want to let go of his arm. He knelt down and looked her in the eyes. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Nobody is taking me anywhere." She let go slowly. He went to the kitchen sink and ran cold water over his wrists. The cuts weren't deep, but they stung. Thin lines where the metal had bitten into the skin when Briggs cinched the cuffs past what was needed. He dried his hands, sat down at the kitchen table, and picked up his phone. He didn't raise his voice, didn't pace, didn't slam anything. He called his commanding officer at Naval Special Warfare Command and reported what had happened in clear, precise language, the way he would report a mission debrief. The stop, the drawn weapon, the knee, the cuffs, the language, his daughter in the doorway. The CO listened without interrupting. When Darnell finished, the CO said 2 words: "Stand by." Within the hour, Naval Special Warfare Command Legal was notified and opened a file. NCIS received a formal referral and began a preliminary inquiry into the use of force against an active-duty Special Operations service member on domestic soil. Darnell's CO made a second call, this one directly to the Lakewood Police Department's Chief of Police. The conversation was short. The tone was not friendly. Meanwhile, 6 miles away, Victor Langley sat in his living room and uploaded the video to 3 platforms. He didn't add commentary. He didn't need to. The footage showed everything. A black man on his knees with open hands, a weapon drawn, a knee driven into his back. Cuffs snapped on while a 7-year-old screamed from the doorway. A woman standing at the edge of her yard with her arms crossed, watching. And one officer's voice, low but audible, saying, "People like you always have a story." By midnight, the video had been viewed over 500,000 times. By morning, it would pass 1 million. And the phones in offices that Briggs and Whitfield had never heard of were already starting to ring. The investigation moved fast. Internal Affairs pulled body camera footage from all 3 officers by Monday morning. Corporal Fenton's camera told the full story. It showed Darnell stepping forward with open hands. It showed Briggs drawing his weapon at 20 feet. It showed the takedown, the knee, the cuffs, the child screaming in the doorway. It captured Briggs' voice saying, "People like you always have a story." The audio was clean. The footage was unbroken. There was nothing to dispute. Officer Sutton's camera was partial. Her angle caught voices but missed the physical contact during the takedown. It showed her blocking the door but cut away before Zoe ran to her father. Useful, but incomplete. Officer Briggs' camera recorded nothing. According to his report, the device malfunctioned during the call. Internal Affairs noted this was the 3rd time in 2 years Briggs' camera had failed during a use-of-force incident. The 911 call audio was reviewed next. Karen Whitfield's words were clear on the recording. Suspicious black male, could be armed, child inside who might be in danger. None of it was true. The mention of a weapon and a child in danger had directly escalated the dispatch priority and shaped how Briggs approached the scene. The district attorney's office flagged the call as potentially criminal. By midweek, the DOJ Civil Rights Division had been contacted and assigned a team. The Pentagon issued a formal inquiry requesting all footage, dispatch records, and officer service files. NCIS expanded its review into a full investigation. Darnell retained a civil rights attorney named Adrienne Caldwell. She reviewed the evidence in one sitting and told him this case would not be quiet. Investigators pulled Karen Whitfield's full 911 history the same week. In 6 months, she had placed 8 calls connected to Darnell's property. A plumber's van, a friend waiting in a parked car, a Friday evening barbecue. 8 calls, 8 dispatches, 0 violations, 0 crimes. They went back further. Over 5 years, Karen had made 14 additional 911 calls involving black or brown individuals on or near Maplewood Drive. A black delivery driver reported as casing houses. A brown teenager on a bicycle reported as suspicious. A black real estate agent reported as an unknown male going door to door. Every call unsubstantiated. Every subject a person of color. Not once had she called about a white person on her street. HOA emails surfaced next. In one, Karen wrote that the board needed to think carefully about the kind of people purchasing in the community. In another, she referenced maintaining the standards that made this neighborhood desirable. She never used the word race. She never had to. A former neighbor contacted investigators after seeing the viral video. Luis and Maria Flores, a Latino couple who had lived on the street for 3 years, described constant police calls, HOA complaints about their yard and front door color, and anonymous notes on their car. One read, "You don't belong here." They moved because fighting was no longer worth it. Karen was interviewed in her living room. Gerald sat beside her in silence. She said she was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe. When investigators asked her to name one specific crime she had ever seen Darnell Carter commit, she couldn't. The investigator closed his notebook. The record said everything she wouldn't. The outcomes came within 2 months. Officer Ryan Briggs was terminated on 5 counts. Excessive force, failure to de-escalate, failure to verify residency, racial bias indicators in his conduct, and suspicious body camera failure, the third such failure in 2 years, a pattern the department could no longer ignore. His law enforcement certification was revoked by the state board. He was barred from working in any policing capacity in the state. Officer Dana Sutton was suspended without pay and demoted for failure to intervene during a use of force she knew was unjustified. Before the disciplinary process concluded, she submitted her resignation. No statement, no apology. She was gone within a week. Corporal James Fenton received a formal commendation for his intervention on scene. In a private conversation with a fellow officer, he said it should have come sooner. "I watched too long." 2 supervisors who had previously dismissed complaints against Briggs were placed under internal review. One had signed off on the dismissal of all 4 prior excessive force complaints. The other had approved Briggs's return to active duty after each incident without requiring retraining. Both were suspended pending the outcome. The Lakewood Police Department entered into a federal consent decree requiring mandatory de-escalation training, independent body camera auditing, civilian oversight of use of force incidents, and quarterly reporting on racial disparities in police contact. Karen Whitfield was charged by the district attorney with filing a false police report and making a false emergency claim involving a weapon. Both were misdemeanors. Both carried potential jail time. But the charges didn't stop there. After reviewing her full 911 history, the pattern of calls targeting black and brown residents, and the HOA emails referencing the kind of people moving into the neighborhood, federal prosecutors added a charge of conspiracy to deprive civil rights under color of law. The trial lasted 4 days. Karen testified she was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe. Prosecutors played the 911 audio. They presented the 22 unsubstantiated calls. They read her emails to the HOA. They called Luis Flores to the stand, who described the anonymous notes, the constant police visits, and the day his wife told him she didn't feel safe in her own home anymore. The jury convicted Karen on all counts. She was sentenced to 14 months in federal prison and 3 years of supervised release. The Maplewood Estates HOA was named as a co-defendant in the civil lawsuit for enabling and failing to address years of discriminatory conduct documented in their own email records. Darnell's civil rights lawsuit against the city, the officers, and Karen Whitfield was settled before trial. The amount was in the 7 figures. The settlement included mandated department reforms, the creation of an independent civilian oversight board, and a formal public apology issued by the city. Darnell didn't attend the press conference. He was at home with Zoe. The basketball hoop went up on a Sunday morning. Darnell tightened the last bolt, stepped back, and bounced the ball once on the driveway before passing it to Zoe. She caught it with both hands, lined up her shot the way he had taught her, and missed wide. She laughed. He rebounded it and passed it back. She shot again. This time, it hit the rim. That afternoon, James and Beverly Washington walked across the street carrying foil-covered dishes. Darnell had the grill going in the backyard. Zoe showed Beverly her new hoop. James handed Darnell a bottle of sauce and said, "Welcome to the street. For real this time." Karen Whitfield's house sat empty. A for sale sign stood in the front yard. The blinds were drawn. She would not be returning. Darnell didn't talk about her. He didn't talk about Briggs or Sutton or the cuffs or the lawn. Not to the neighbors, not to the press. He had said what he needed to say in his statements, in the courtroom, and in the evidence. That was enough. He used a portion of the settlement to establish a legal defense fund for victims of racially motivated false police reports. People who had been swatted, targeted, and terrorized by neighbors who weaponized 911 and knew exactly what they were doing. He partnered with Adrian Caldwell to build a network of attorneys willing to take those cases. A few weeks later, his commanding officer called. "Darnell, you handled it like a SEAL." Darnell looked through the kitchen window at Zoe shooting baskets in the driveway, the hoop he had been building the day they put him on the ground. "I handled it like her father." The final frame of the body camera footage would circulate for months. A decorated war hero, face down on his own front lawn, wrists cuffed behind his back, his 7-year-old daughter screaming 10 feet away. Underneath it, in every article, every training bulletin, every courtroom exhibit, the same words appeared. This is what unchecked bias looks like. No names were printed. They didn't need to be. The footage spoke for itself. This case was brutal, but the case on the right spirals completely out of control.
Welcome to a channel dedicated to the absolute truth. We believe in holding power to account by carefully examining the evidence. Opinions vary, but the records don't lie. Thank you so much for watching today.